Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's podcast. I am with Kimberly Duclos, who happens to be my mother, and we're going to be talking to her about what it's like to be a family member of someone um, with addiction. So, would you like me to call you Kimberly, or do you want me to call you Mom, or what's going on here?
Doesn't really matter. Whatever you're comfortable with, Quinn.
Okay.
Mom is fine.
Okay, so Mom, I'd like you to introduce yourself to my listeners. What is it that you do, who you are, a little bit of background on yourself before we kind of jump into the story.
Good morning, class. My name is Kimberly. I am Quinn's mom. Very proud of him. I lived with addiction for my whole life. I grew up with a single parent who was widowed. My father was an alcoholic. My mother was an alcoholic. I have a sibling who's an alcoholic, so I'm very versed in this topic. And I would consider myself probably an alcoholic by anybody else's standards but our family. I grew up in a very small town. There was nothing really to do. I was educated in the community college system and recently received a degree in quality assurance administration. Sorry, your education is your point. I work for a hospital system and it works with women and children. And now I am starting to see in my adult life addiction in the births of babies, which is very different for me. I am here to talk to you about my life and what it's like to be living in and around the situation and how I dealt with it. And I'm hoping that you get some points, some red flags, some positive feedback from Quinn about what you can do to help people who have addiction.
Yeah, so thanks, Mom. We're gonna kind of keep it casual. You sound kind of like, I don't know if you wrote some points up or something, but we're just gonna try and keep it casual.
Oh, it was off the top of my head.
Oh, was it? That's great. So just like a conversation, and I mean, if you want to talk about what it was like with your mom and your dad a little bit, growing up with.
Now you want to start over? We can start over.
No, we don't have to start over. I'm recording.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it was great. This is what it's about. We want to hear real stories and it's it's totally fine. So, I mean, if you want to start off with a little bit about what your parents were like growing up in that environment and how that's kind of informed your adulthood. I mean, obviously growing up in a small town, like what else is there to do besides going down to the liquor store and grabbing something to drink, right? I mean, can't go to the bowling alley or something because it's what's
Yeah.
that?
He said sitting at the Hampton House in the morning, like after my father used to work third shift, he'd go to the Hampton House.
Yeah, what did you say? He used to get I
Cornflakes
believe
and
you always
beer.
told the story of cornflakes and beer with your dad.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. So drinking was normal in my house.
Yep. Yes.
Everything revolved around parties and, we had a full bar downstairs. He converted the cellar. So it was always around alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah. And then he died when you were 10, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yep. And so with Grandma Joan, who's your mother, what was it like being raised by the single mother who also had a similar issue?
It was embarrassing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was awful. It was awful. She functioned very well, but and she was very well liked in the community because she had a really a great job in town. But she would come home at whatever shift, whenever her shift ended, she would drink herself into a stupor and then pass out, go to sleep. So I didn't have friends over. I always went to everybody's house. I always made dinner. I had a lot of responsibilities as a child. And then, looking back, it was just what I knew.
Hmm. So going from that until your own up until your own relationship, um, what was it like when you met Dad?
Well, um, I, I don't know. I thought your dad was awesome when I first met him. I still think your dad's awesome, but he was younger than I was. He's only two and a half years, or a year and a half, 2 years younger than I am. When I met him, I crashed his Christmas party, and he just was so cool. He had a Camaro, and he was cute, and he was funny, and we just had a great time. But what I didn't know was at that Christmas party, he had a bottle of rum under the table and he was making his own drinks.
Hmm.
Right? Typical of dad.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. That didn't bother me then. At that point in my life, I had just gotten my own apartment, and I was on my own, and I really wasn't a heavy drinker then. I just think maybe the day before my 21st birthday, I went into a bar and had a in the corner because I was paranoid I was going to get carded. But Dad was younger than me, but they did that in their house too. They always had their rum and Pepsi, and that was a thing. And Jeff was dating a Diet Coke girl. It was like, ooh, taboo.
Yeah, and with my grandfather, Dad's dad, he eventually, became sober in the mid 90s.
But that he was in a terrible car accident, and that's what happened to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah. So moving on from when you guys met, what was that? Late 80s, right?
1988.
Yeah, because you were married in 1990.
But,
so
yeah.
Going on from there, what did you notice about the drinking as it moved on?
Well, I noticed that all of our social activities revolved around alcohol. We had friends that, we had parties with, or we stayed at their house and we played games or puzzles or whatever, but everything was involved around drinking. But when you're in your 20s and you're living on your own, you kind of think that, that this is normal, this is what people do. And, at that point, neither one of us had a problem like getting up and going to work the next day, or, functioning, or health issues either. But yeah, everything that we did.
So you figured it was kind of normal.
Yeah, normal. I mean, but then again, I was never exposed to it socially. I mean, yes, in my house, but I never went out. I never went to, house parties where, like when I was a teenager, when somebody went away, their parents went away, I never went to things like that. So I just thought it was a normal progression of your 20s. And then we got pregnant with you, and like drinking stopped for me, and your father kept going, and then that's when he started traveling with work. So when he started traveling with work, it was not only within the United States, but it was international. And that's when it really started to ramp up. I noticed, when he would come home, he'd be okay, but he'd always have to have actually a 30-pack of Ice House. He would go through that in a weekend. Remember those days?
I do remember Ice House. Yeah, that was my first beer at age 5.
See?
But it was like a sip of beer.
Yeah.
And he was like, try this, you won't like it.
Yeah. But, I did notice like when he came home from places, he would bring fancy liquor bottles, and, he had this obsession with liquor bottles from other countries, and he has a glass obsession anyway. So I just thought it was normal, but it scared me for him to be away because I guess must have been starting to notice it. But then after I had you, I was so busy, trying to keep up with you and the house and him being gone so much again that I didn't really notice a lot. The whole time that you and Rach were growing up, we kind of,
Who's Rach?
oh, I'm sorry, Rachel is your sister, my daughter Rachel.
4.5 years younger than I am.
Yes. So our lives at that time were focused on you guys. But again, we had, your father made sure that we had like stuff to do, like being in the boat and being on the sleds and stuff like that. But again, all of the friends that we used to hang around with, especially on the boat, we would drink constantly, and it didn't phase your father at all. And it didn't phase me, which is awful. But that was the norm. We'd sit on the beach on the Connecticut River, and just that was it. That was our social life. And again, it just happened to creep up. And then I don't even know. I can't even recall when your father started, when he switched over to vodka. I can't even recall that.
I don't know either. I might think when he worked for the I don't want to say the name of the company, but when he had the white van.
Yes.
And he was pulled over for the accident, or like the small accident in the McDonald's parking lot.
Yeah.
I think that might have been part of it. And can you talk to what happened to him physically that might have led to that?
Sure. Your father always had a bad back, and he worked very, very hard to support us. He truly, truly did. He injured his back in 2012 at an organization that did not carry workman's comp insurance. So they paid for his surgeries, and that was it. He went right back to work. He never had physical therapy. He never had the right treatment, I don't think. He never had follow-up treatment. So I think that injury, because it wasn't taken care of properly, really started his, I think you're totally right. I think it ramped up his drinking. He was a functional alcoholic, though. He, as far as I know, at that point, wasn't drinking on the job. There was a couple incidences where I think they found beer bottles in his work van. However, his story was always, I'm collecting bottles because, I need to buy this or I need to buy that, or for the environment or whatever, which, it could have been at the beginning because he was laid off several times, and that's what he did. He'd go and collect returnables and go whatever, but
Yep. And just for clarification to those listening, in Massachusetts, if you don't know, and several other northeastern states, in California and Hawaii as well, glass bottles, plastic bottles, certain recyclables are 5-cent or 10-cent returnables. So if you collect bottles off the side of the road, you can return them for cash. So what my father would do was he would collect them off the side of the road if he saw them, put them in a bag, and then go return them. But what the habit ended up being was that he would do that, get the returnable money, and exchange it for the cheapest pint of vodka that you could get.
You are correct, sir. You are definitely correct. So after that injury in 2012, he ended up having 3 surgeries on his back. The last one was a fusion he was completely fused from L2 to S1. So his second lumbar to his first sacral joints all fused with titanium rods and coils, which made him disabled. He could not work. And I think the combination of him being in pain and not being able to provide for his family put him into a huge depression.
Mm-hmm.
He was unwilling to get help. During that time I think his second surgery, he got addicted to Oxycontin.
Mm-hmm.
And just started spiraling out of there. It just was awful. I
I
mean,
don't
I
know
would,
if I don't know if you're willing, but would you speak to the extent of the Oxycontin?
sure.
Yeah,
So the Oxycontin was for his ankle. Was it for his ankle or for his? No, I think it was his second back surgery.
yeah. The ankle
Um,
was later on.
ankles later on. So the Oxycontin was for the second surgery, which was the first major fusion that he had. The first one was a microsurgery. The second one was fusion. He was supposed to be working from home because this legitimately he hurt his back again at a different company. Went through all the steps, had the surgery, was doing fine, stopped drinking, but was taking the oxy. Now, when I knew that there would be a problem, so I would leave, I think the two just to get him through the day until I got home. And somehow he was finding them and calling for more. And I didn't know because I was working and I had other things to do. And then he'd say, "Oh, I need to go to Walmart and get a prescription," and I had to go in and get it because he couldn't walk, and it was Oxycontin. And I'm like, "This is crazy." But
Mm-hmm.
he weaned himself off of that, but back onto alcohol.
Mm-hmm. So, what were the differences you saw in him between the oxy and the alcohol?
The oxy, he wasn't belligerent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he would just like lay around and not be belligerent. Like when Dad he went through a stage of, and I'm sure that you'll recall this from your youth. He was the one drunk,
Mm-hmm.
and then he turned into the belligerent jerk
Mm-hmm.
drunk, and then he turned into the pathetic drunk uh, right before my eyes, and I noticed it, but I don't know if I cared enough. I mean, I would hope that I cared enough. I tried everything I could to help him, but those stages just were, where he couldn't get enough alcohol in him. He'd start in the morning and then just go all day and sleep, and he was useless. He was absolutely useless in that peak of his alcoholism. He was useless. And I I don't know. I loved him and I did everything that I could to help him, but he wasn't willing to help himself either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the
So,
physical
go ahead.
aspect
Mm-hmm.
was different from the oxy to the alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he was younger too.
Yeah, 2012.
Yeah, I think that would have been 2013 or 14 because he had a 2012 surgery and a 2012 third, and then his final fusion was 2016, and that's when they couldn't do anything more for him, and that's when it went downhill fast because he couldn't go back to work, and I'm sure he was depressed about that. And then after his ankle surgery in 2018, yikes.
Yeah. So, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So,
Because using the word yikes is obviously never a good thing.
well, in between 2016 and 2018, your father had withdrawal. He had the DTs so bad. He
What are
was
the
running around
DTs for our class?
delirium tremens. Tremens, is that it, Quinn?
Yeah.
While he detoxed, he tried so hard to do it by himself. I know he did. He went days without alcohol, and then his body would go through withdrawal and he would start hallucinating. One night we had a bear in our backyard, and he actually physically called environmental services and told them that he shot the bear with a BB gun and he was laying under the chicken coop. So,
And that had not happened.
No, it absolutely had not happened.
Was there actually a bear in the backyard?
No, there was nothing. I went out, there was nothing. He was having hallucinations. So I took him to the doctor, and the doctor did a direct admit to the hospital. And at that point, we found out that things were failing. I mean, and let me just backtrack a little bit. Your father was diagnosed with cirrhosis, I want to say in his 40s, from his early 40s. And they gave him 15 years to live if he didn't stop drinking. He never stopped drinking. That didn't faze him at all. He just learned to lie and to hide it better. So fast forward to the first detox. That was the motorcycle accident, right, Quinn? Like
Yes.
Okay. So I might
So
go
talk
off
about
track.
that in a little bit more.
Okay.
No, just talk about the motorcycle accident in a little bit more detail, because it's not really an accident.
No, it was not an accident. Actually, it was an incident. So Jeffrey had detoxed from the hospital in January, and we had decided to actually separate a little bit, if you call it a little bit. We decided to start dating over. One day he called me and told me that his nephew, Matthew, who is his godson also, was having a baseball game, and he wanted to pick me up and take me on the back of his Harley, which was our common bond, to Matthew's game. And we did. We drove around for a little while. We went and saw Matthew's game. It was getting dark. He said, "Let's go home." I said, "Okay." We got home, pulled up the driveway, and he went to put the kickstand down on his bike. And the bike was so heavy that it tipped over towards his right instead of towards his left, which is where the kickstand was, and twisted his ankle. Broke his ankle in a trimalleolar fashion, which means he had a fracture of all three bones of his ankle. And I could not lift the bike off of him. So when the paramedics were called, they got him off the bike. They asked me allergies and anything. And I said to them, he's also a recovering alcoholic, because at that point I thought he was recovering, and he should not have any medication that isn't necessary, any pain medication. So they said to him, "When was your last drink?" And he said, 3 months ago. So at that point, okay, that's lines up, the timeline lines up. They took him to the hospital, got him stabilized and ready for surgery. And they came to me and they kept asking me, "When was his last drink? When was his last drink? When was his last drink?" And I said, 3 months ago, 3 months ago, 3 months ago. They got him out of OR, up to a bedroom, and he started detoxing. And they pulled me aside and they said, his last drink was this morning.
Oh my goodness.
That's when it hit me that he took me, not only did he endanger me on the back of the motorcycle, but he lied to me, which he was very good at. He was very good at lying, but I was also very good at being naive and not wanting to know the truth. But that's what happened with his ankle. That's what started that. That was a mess. That was a mess. His ankle never healed right. But now, and you'll know this, that when you drink an excessive amount of alcohol, your bones thin. So his bones were so porous that his foot, when it healed so he was like a duck, out towards the right. So that was causing pain, and again, more depression because he didn't ask for help. So
now, also with the ankle and the foot and everything, were there any other conditions that were exacerbated by that?
Well, his back made his back worse.
And what about the gout?
The gout, not necessarily from the trauma. The gout was always about the drinking. And he was supposed to be on a medication that was like a prophylactic, and he took it until it ran out, and then he would never get it refilled. He was also put on the medication that when you take it, it makes you sick when you drink. Stop doing that. He
Hmm.
never liked to take medication.
Hmm.
He, even for his cholesterol and blood pressure,
Hmm.
he didn't like doctors, and he just didn't really care about his health. And for the few times that we went to therapy, the therapist told us that he had a death wish because he was doing all this stuff.
Hmm. I
So,
guess kind of what I was getting at there was it's a constellation of things. It's not just the alcohol, but the alcohol is kind of exacerbating what was that there.
oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So sorry to interrupt you, but keep going if you want.
Yeah. No, no. I mean, I'm just rambling right now because, it's funny how you say one thing and it just sparks a memory of another. So I might go off on a tangent. I'm really sorry.
No, don't be
But
sorry because that's kind of what this is about. It's telling the story of a real person. And,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
you're my mother, but you're also a real person with real experiences. And I can never know how you experienced this. I can only know how I experienced it.
yeah,
And I can never know how Rachel experienced it
yeah.
or someone else in the family. So that's why I wanted to get your perspective and share that with, the audience.
Well, let's see. After his ankle surgery, um, what happened? Let's see. That was pretty intense. That ankle surgery. Let's fast forward it a little bit.
Sure.
He he healed from that. That was his first detox, right?
Yes.
Right after that was his first detox. And that was that the one we sent to Texas?
Uh, I'm not sure. Um,
2018. So his second
it was the
detox.
second
Okay,
one at the end of the year, I
second,
believe.
that was like November. But what
Yeah.
prompted that?
I
Was that a
don't
DUI?
remember. It might have been a DUI on the bike. I
Yeah.
remember he was going like 60 or 80 on the back roads. It was like 35 and he got pulled over. Or that might have been in the Jeep or something.
I think it was in the Jeep because the last two were on his bike. So yeah. So he got a DUI. Um, that was that the one that he went to jail for?
No, no, no.
No,
That was the last one.
the second and third one. So he got a DUI, excuse me, and lost his license for a little while, and was very dependent on me. And that's when I started to get very angry because um, I know, I knew, I knew the signs. I knew the signs, and they were there the whole time. And I just chose to not, yes, ignore them to a certain degree, but hope and pray that he wouldn't lie to me.
Thank you for joining us with part one of this episode. Part two will be up shortly. I really appreciate you listening to Kimberly's story, and we will continue very shortly. Hope you enjoy.